Last week, 2 weeks ago, because we missed last week, uh, a few things that let me just review quickly. I don't want to jump into our lesson today, but the Lord talked about true followers, and we studied that last week, and this is on the culmination of his the foot washing. He said, "True followers of Jesus do not seek positions of authority or lordship over others, but they seek to serve those who happen to be under their authority." Mm-hmm. Big difference there. Typically, the way of the world is those who are in authority lord it over them. But Jesus says if you are in a position of authority, that means you serve those who are under you. True leaders do not entangle themselves with benefactors to whom they become subject. Remember, we dove into that pretty thoroughly. And I guess, Don, you missed that, but, Jesus talked about, I don't have the quote in front of me here, but, lording it over others and then benefactors that lord it over them. And I suggested what that means is a lot of people who get in positions of authority do so because other benefactors have put them there. You look at any politician that's in a position of authority, and there's benefactors behind the scenes that have put them there, to whom they
expect to favor.
Are also, under their thumb, under their authority. So we don't entangle ourselves with benefactors. Jesus served as the one pure example of true leadership. He is the one we look to. And Jesus will acknowledge the faithfulness of his true followers with the promise of intimacy with him in the kingdom to come. Okay. So, now we're going to look at basically John 13 with a little bit of Luke put in here also. So following our harmony from MacArthur, we're in section 170, and let me read what he put together here. So when Judas had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him immediately. Little children, I shall be with you a little while longer. You will seek me. And as I said to the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. So now I say to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. So now I say to you," meaning the same thing. "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, loving one another, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." So Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus answered him, "Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you shall follow me afterward." Peter said to him, "Lord, why can I not follow you now?" And the Lord said, "Simon, Simon, indeed, Satan has asked for you, that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you, that your faith should not fail. And when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren." But he said to him, "Lord, I am ready to go with you, both to prison and to death. I will lay down my life for your sake." Jesus answered him, "Will you lay down your life for my sake? Most assuredly, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny 3 times that you know me." And notice that sentence, we'll study it, but notice that sentence is from Luke. Mm-hmm. Okay? And I'll dive into some technical stuff here shortly. "And he said to them," talking to his disciples, "When I sent you out without money bag, knapsack, and sandals, did you lack anything?" So they said nothing. And then he said to them, "But now he who has a money bag, let him take it, and likewise a knapsack, and he who has no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one. For I say to you, that which is written must still be accomplished in me." And he was numbered with the transgressors. He's quoting Old Testament. "For the things concerning me have an end." So they said, "Lord, look, here are 2 swords." And he said to them, "It is enough." Okay. So I have suggested to you in the previous lessons that John's commentary concerning the washing of the disciples' feet, traditionally ascribed to the night of the Lord's Supper, may be an incorrect assumption. As we dive into the next section of MacArthur's horizontal harmony, and after having gone deeper into my personal study of several vertical harmonies, okay, concerning the Lord's last days and the Lord's Supper, I'm leaning more to the opinion that we're really talking about 2 different things. That the supper in which the Lord's Supper took the supper where the washing of the feet took place may be actually different than the Lord's Supper as it is traditionally ascribed. Again, when things are clear in a "thus saith the Lord" sort of way, I will be dogmatic and proclaim biblical truth. When we are attempting to piece together a chronological order of events described by 4 different authors with 4 different agendas, writing to 4 different people groups over 2,000 years ago, we're basically trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle. Mm-hmm. MacArthur has done a great job as a credited Bible scholar by putting together his harmony, again, horizontally, so it reads as one book, as opposed to vertically, like reading it in columns with the Gospels side by side, okay? And I respect his work, but I think the question of when and where the foot washing took place deserves a closer look, as that also impacts what I think is a clearer understanding of what was actually taking place in the last days of the Lord, including the attitudes of the disciples and why they had those attitudes. So, one more time, as I have told you 100 times, serious Bible study entails 80% of observation, and that means study of the context, of the history, the geography, the related scripture, culture, religion, language, so forth. After which we have devoted that much time, then we can spend 10% of our time formulating a correct interpretation, followed by 10% more of our time in determining a correct application. If you don't put the time in for the study, you're going to get an incorrect interpretation, thus resulting in an incorrect application. So again, after looking at several vertical harmonies along with MacArthur's horizontal harmony to see how each editor attempted to align the chronological events, and with a careful study of key words used in each, I'm surprised, frankly, to admit that after 40 years of ministry and countless hours of formal study, to find myself coming to a new view. And we'll discuss this more as we proceed today. And remember, I'm not trying to be dogmatic here, but I'm trying to open our hearts and minds to something that is not dictated by tradition and traditional interpretation. I'm not trying to turn anything upside down, but it's just things that I have come to see in this study, and I'm going to put it before you, and you can do with it, what you like. So, looking beginning to look at our passage, we're going to look basically at chapter 13 of John with some inserted commentary by Luke that MacArthur puts together with it. But as we begin, I challenge you to remember that chapter 12 of John, remember we're looking at the context here, chapter 12 of John begins with the 6 days before the Passover. And the Greek word there for Passover is the formal word Paschal, which refers to the Passover meal. Mm-hmm. Then leads right into Jesus arriving into Bethany. 6 days before, he arrives into Bethany, where he's staying at Mary and Martha's house, with Mary anointing Jesus with very costly oil of spikenard. This is all in chapter 12. This caused the complaint by Judas and his subsequent rebuke by Jesus, with John indicating at this point that the chief priest's plot was already underway to kill Jesus. Okay? You think back with me to chapter 12 and see what John was writing. John finishes out chapter 12, recording some of the Lord's daytime teachings, confrontations, and signs, including a voice from heaven, which is not included in the synoptics. And remember that John is writing an apologetic treatise declaring the deity of the Lord. And he just kind of briefly gives a synopsis. Now, all of these things took place during the daytime of the Passion Week, beginning on Monday, before he would return back to Bethany each night with the disciples, presumably to stay in the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Okay? So, you with me? That's chapter 12 of John. Chapter 13, basically the foot washing chapter, begins with the words, now before the feast. The Greek word there's hiorte, which means the festival or the feast day of the Passover. And again, he uses the formal word paschal, meaning the paschal meal, infers that everything that takes place next in what John is writing, specifically the washing of the disciples' feet, would have been a continuation of Jesus' time in Bethany before he and his disciples celebrated their Paschal meal together. The next verse in John, as he begins to describe the foot washing, begins, and supper, diapanon, which is a Greek word meaning a communal evening meal being ended, suggests this was not the Paschal meal, or John would have identified it as such, because he's already referred to it a couple of times. Again, this is my opinion as I look at how this is written and put together. One thing I've come to after 80% of effort in the observation, which gives me confidence in my having spent 80% of my time in this observation, gives me confidence in my suspected interpretation. And if I am correct, then John's description of a very relaxed meal, with John leaning his head on Jesus' breast, go back to chapter 13 and look at this with me. And Jesus whispering, it is he to whom I shall give a piece of bread when I have dipped it, followed by the Lord's private conversation with Judas, with him departing immediately thereafter, while it was night, without any of the other disciples knowing why, to me, makes more sense if it all took place in Bethany. When compared to the Synoptic writers' accounts of the Last Supper, they have a different version of the way Jesus handled Judas that night. Look at Mark. Now, as they sat and ate, Jesus said, "Assuredly I say to you, one of you who eats with me will betray me." A general comment. Matthew's account. Now, as they were eating, he said, "Assuredly I say to you, one of you will betray me." And they were exceedingly sorrowful, and each of them began to say to him, "Lord, is it I?" He answered and said, He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me. Well, who all were dipping into the dish? They all were.
Yeah.
And it's basically the same thing, a general statement. One of you is going to betray me.
Right.
And Luke writes, but behold, the hand of my betrayer is with me on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Further, synoptic writers include no mention of Judas leaving the Paschal meal early, which would have been unlikely for him to do anyway. And of course, John says, after I, dipped the bread and gave it to Judas and had the conversation with Judas, then he got up and left. And everybody wondered, why is he leaving? That's John's account. So if, and it's a big if, what I suggest is true, then we need to understand that the remainder of chapter 13 in John, all the way to chapter 18, may be a collection of Jesus' private teachings to his intimate disciples that probably took place during their time together in Bethany, not necessarily all at the Last Supper. Because again, John is not writing a chronology of the events. He's writing what Jesus taught. He's describing, the things that Jesus said and Jesus did to prove his deity. He's not writing a chronology like the synoptic writers were. The three synoptic writers recorded the Olivet Discourse, which described in terrifying detail, which we have studied in the past weeks, his prophetic teachings of the end times, but John is writing his record with another agenda in mind. So now, diving back into what we got. So when, and it means Judas had gone out, again, just for a minute here, think of this with me in the possible context of being in Bethany, not the Paschal meal, not the Passover, having taken place over a communal meal, with Jesus privately identifying his betrayer to John, the one who loved him, with Judas going out after supper, but not that late, with no one else knowing why. This may have been when he went to barter for his 30 pieces of silver. Regardless of the precise chronology, it was at this point, whether it was in Bethany or during the Last Supper in Jerusalem, that the die was cast for Jesus' destiny with the cross. Jesus said at this point, now, meaning right after Judas departed, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him immediately. Now, this is kind of a deep verse to try to wrap one's brain around.
There it is.
But let's remember the context. Jesus is headed to the cross and has been trying to prepare his disciples for his death, burial, and resurrection for a long time. And they still cannot fully comprehend it, as frankly would neither any of us, truth be told. As Judas left at that moment, Jesus declared, now he was to be glorified through his destiny with the cross, and not just the cross alone, but with his resurrection. By facing the cross, God the Father would be glorified because he, God the Father, gave his only begotten Son to save the world. That glory belongs to God. And God the Father would glorify himself in the Son through the power of the resurrection. Further, Jesus said this would happen quickly and in short order. The Greek word is euthos. That means straight away or just now. Okay? Looking further into the Old Testament, Remember Romans 5, 8, and 9? God demonstrates his own love toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Much more then, having now been justified by his blood, by his death, we shall be saved from wrath through him. This glory belongs to God. Daniel 7. I was watching in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him, the Ancient of Days. Then to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom the one which shall not be destroyed. And this is the glory that God gives Jesus. And he goes on to say here in John, little children, I shall be with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, where I am going, you cannot come. So he's declaring to his disciples that he will be with them just a little while longer, and the Greek word there is mikros eti. It means little, small. It is the direct opposite of mega. Okay? John has Jesus using this phrase 2 times previously to prepare the disciples for his pending departure, and then again after his resurrection, and then once more in the book of Revelation when he says the saints are told to wait a little while longer until the number of their brethren to be killed is completed. So to translate it as immediately, meaning just boom, right now, there's a misunderstanding. It's not the application of the word. It means a little while, but remember, we've already studied and quite comprehensively, God's timing is not the same as ours. Mm-hmm. One day to the Lord is like 1,000 years to us. Mm-hmm. And then the word to seek is zeteo. It means to seek what has been lost or what is due. In other words, the word carries 2 nuances that we need to consider together. First, it means to seek something that has been lost, and Jesus is talking about, I'm going away, okay? Second, it also means to demand what is due, and it implies serious effort and can be used of seeking information, meaning to study, to learn, to understand what is going on, to learn the ways of God so you can accurately comprehend what this is all about. Okay? And he says, so now I say to you, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Now he gives a new and a direct personal commandment to his disciples to love. In this Greek word, agapeo, the verb form. And that means to love unconditionally. I don't love you just because you love me. It means I love you because I've made a choice. I sacrifice. You make a conscious choice and a commitment to love one another. And he says, so now I say to you, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. And he's going further to once again use his own actions toward them as the perfect example of that love, which they are to demonstrate toward one another. Remember at the start of the foot washing in John 13, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And then at the close, for I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. The greater serves the lesser. That's a commitment. That's a decision. By this, all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. The true test of a genuine follower of Christ is a willingness to love other brethren unconditionally, to forgive them when they hurt you, to forget, and to continue to be committed to that person. That's a choice. Godly marriages are built upon unconditional commitment to one another. Christians are to be identified by their unconditional love and commitment to the Lord and to one another. as I have told you guys many times, as a minister, in performing, wedding ceremonies, I will not conduct a wedding ceremony for any couple where I do not believe both of them are not seriously committed to the Lord and to one another. If they're lying about their commitment to the Lord, they're living in sin, they're living in rebellion, but they just want to have the picture of a formal marriage, I'm not going to stand before holy God and have people make a false oath before God. I just will not do that. I think that is too dangerous. Godly marriages are built upon unconditional commitment to one another and to the Lord. Simon Peter said to him at this time, Lord, where are you going? Jesus answered him, where I am going you cannot follow me now, but you shall follow me afterward. So referring back to, I shall be with you a little while longer, where I am going you cannot come, Peter demands to know from Jesus just where it is he is going. Despite the many times he's warned the disciples that he must be handed over to the religious leaders and to the Gentiles to die, with even direct rebuke given to Peter when he had declared this should not be so, back in Mark 8:31. And he began to teach him, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he spoke this word openly to his disciples. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when he had turned around and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter, saying, Get behind me, Satan, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. And again, same incident, I believe, recorded by Matthew. From that time, Jesus began to show to his disciples he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and raised the third day. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, Far be it from you, Lord, this shall not happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan, you are an offense to me. You are not mindful of the things of God, but of the things of men. So this is the history of Peter. Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? Still not understanding or accepting that Jesus had been, what he had been saying about his impending death, he asked the Lord a foolish question, exposing his ongoing obliviousness or denial even to the events that are about to take place. It is at this point that MacArthur inserts pieces of Luke's record of the discussion between Peter and Jesus concerning the pending betrayal. This is MacArthur inserting this statement from Luke at this point in the discussion. And the Lord said, Simon, Simon, indeed Satan has asked for you, that he may sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you, that your faith should not fail, and when you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. But he said to him, Lord, I'm ready to go with you, both to prison and to death. So Luke has this discussion taking place at the table during the Last Supper. The context is very clear. Okay? So we're jumping from John's account, which I'm suggesting to you may not have been what we think is the traditional Paschal meal, the Last Supper. May. Okay? Just something to think about. Luke is specifically, the context is the Last Supper. MacArthur takes this statement from Luke very specifically from the Last Supper meal, inserts it into the dialogue that John is having. Are you following me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd lost my spot. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. And we need to remember that Luke was not there at the Last Supper. Right. Mm-hmm. He was not an eyewitness to these events. He had to rely on others to provide him with the information he placed in his gospel as inspired by the Holy Spirit. Now, we can trust completely the scriptures and what they teach. But again, what we're trying to do here in our study of understanding the ways of God, the doctrine, theology, and all of that, we're also trying to just understand the chronology, okay? And this is a difficult task, okay? We can trust what they teach, but attempting to be precise in about the chronology of the events can be difficult because, again, you're dealing with 4 different writers, 4 different people to whom they're writing, 4 different reasons that they're writing, and it's 2,000 years ago. And we're just trying to make sense of it, okay? One only need to look at 2 or 3 different harmonies, okay, the traditional columned harmonies, to see how qualified biblical scholars all differ in each of their opinions of when these things took place next to each other. So let me just say, as Jesus, is continuing to try to prepare his disciples for what is about to happen. Oh goodness, I got things cropping up here. Okay. He addresses Peter as the key leader of the group to tell him that Satan has demanded from God the Father, exatio, meaning to demand, permission, to sift. Syniadzo means to sift, to shake in a sieve, by inward agitation to try one's faith to the verge of overthrow. That's the formal definition. This tells us the ways of the enemy, as well as something about the ways of God, and is reminiscent of what took place with Job. In Job 1, and the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" And Satan answered, saying to the Lord, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it." Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and shuns evil?" So Satan answered the Lord and said, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person." So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. And Peter himself writes later, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour." Assault by the enemy, especially when we are living righteous lives and are part of God's redemptive tapestry that he is weaving for the world. Remember, in that analogy, we don't see the beauty of the front. We don't see the end picture. We're just part of the knots and confusion and, things on the back of the tapestry. The enemy wants us just to throw in the towel. And Peter goes on to say, "I will lay down my life for your sake." So in confidence of his loyalty to Jesus and confidence in his personal strength, and this is so important, guys, to withstand the assaults of the enemy Peter boldly declares his unbendable allegiance to Jesus. Guys, we can never rely on our own strength.
No.
I pray every day, Lord, I know I am weak. I know I am physically weak. I am determined to follow you. But oh God, if the end came today, if we had to grow, if I had to go through the great tribulation or suffer tremendous persecution, my prayer is, oh God, you give me the strength, because I don't have it. And I know I don't have it. And when you think to yourself that you do have the strength to withstand the temptation, to withstand the trial, that you can make it on your own power, on your own strength, that's when you're weakest.
Right.
And if I've learned anything over these 40 years of ministry and walking with the Lord, I can't do it. It's got to be him. Jesus answered him and said, will you lay down your life for my sake? Most assuredly, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny 3 times that you know me. And here we find an interesting situation embodied in the accounts of all 4 of the gospel writers. Okay? The strange thing about the rooster crowing. Matthew says, assuredly I say to you that this night, and again, the synoptic writers are talking in the context of the actual Last Supper. This night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Mark says, assuredly I say to you that today, even this night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And Luke, I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny 3 times that you know me. John's account says, will you lay down your life for my sake? Most assuredly, I say to you, the rooster shall not crow till you have denied me 3 times. If you look at the 4 accounts carefully, 3 of them specifically refer to that night. Okay? John's is more open-ended. Again, not being dogmatic, that this conversation took place outside the Last Supper, because we do have the 3 synoptic writers specifically saying it'll be this night the rooster crows. But John, in his account, just says, rooster's not going to crow until you have denied me 3 times. So, stepping aside from MacArthur's horizontal harmony for a moment, and looking at the 4 gospel records side by side, each of the synoptic writers clearly are in the stated context of the Last Supper. They say this night or day the rooster will crow. It doesn't really matter whether or not the rooster crows once or twice. What matters is before the night is over, Peter will deny Jesus 3 times. That's synoptic writers. However, John's account simply says the rooster will not crow before Peter's denials. Guys, nothing here is conclusive, but John's record does leave open the possibility that this prophetic declaration could have been made twice. Could have made it in a general statement in Bethany, but then the synoptic writers record it specifically that night at the Lord's Supper. This matches Jesus' pattern in dealing with the disciples over hard things to understand by first speaking in generalities and then coming back a second time and repeating what he said, but with more details. Just a thought. You do with it what you want. But I found it a fascinating study personally. And he said to them, when I sent you out with that money bag, knapsack, sandals, did you lack anything? So they said nothing. The real issue at hand was the matter of faith and the disciples' ability to trust God and His Word when He sent them out on a hard task. Then he said to them, but now he who has a money bag, and this is John's account, let him take it, and likewise a knapsack. He who has no sword, let him sell this garment and buy one. He makes clear to his disciples and to us also that trusting God for difficult days ahead is important. However, they weren't expected to be foolish and openly allow themselves to foolishly become martyrs and suffer needlessly when they could prepare themselves. They needed to make ready for the difficult times ahead. Back up with me just a second here now. If again, this conversation took place, as John records it, over a supper in Bethany, remember the conditions and situation. They were kind of incognito. They would, go during the daytime when the crowds were there, they would teach, but as soon as they could, they kind of vanished out of the way, went back across the Kidron Valley to Bethany. Were kind of in hiding as best we can interpret and understand it, because the scribes and Pharisees were looking for an opportunity to take him when the crowd was not there. That was the whole point of Judas's betrayal. And we can see this as a warning, saying, if you have a money bag, hang on to it, and a knapsack, and if you have a sword, good. If you don't have one, you probably should buy one, is basically the interpretation of what he's saying. Mm-hmm. And again, I tend to think that statement that John records is better understood on the other side of Kidron Valley in Bethany than necessarily the night the Last Supper took place. Now that's just me. The Lord goes on to say, according to John, for I say to you that this which is written must still be accomplished in me. And he was numbered with the transgressors, referring to the Old Testament, for the things concerning me have an end. And Isaiah says, I will divide him a portion with the great, he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul unto death. He was numbered with the transgressors, and he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. So they said, Lord, look, here are 2 swords. And he said to them, it is enough. So understanding that they were not to face the next events defenseless, they took inventory of their weapons, and they had 2 swords. And between them all there were 2 swords, and then never intending them to engage in open combat, Jesus just simply said, that will be enough. So, questions, Lee?
Yeah, I don't quite understand that. So 2 swords, that will be enough. Is he talking about amongst the 12 or actually the 11?
Yeah, because he's not wanting them to go into open combat and fight. He just wants them to be able to protect themselves. Yeah. And then that's basically what they were doing. It doesn't matter whether you think this took place, at the Last Supper or at a different meal during their time in Bethany. Just remember what was going on. Mm-hmm. He had, the high priest looking for Jesus in particular. It was a dangerous time. It was understood that they wanted to put him to death. Judas was betraying him at this point, and Jesus knew that. He wasn't telling his disciples, okay, we all need to have a sword and be prepared to battle. He just wanted them to be able to generally protect themselves.
Yeah. Kind of.
So 2 is enough. He wasn't expecting them to go into battle.
Did you happen to look up that statement, "it is enough"?
Concerning,
This right here.
okay,
It is enough. What exactly does it mean?
well, other than the fact I think we don't need more than 2 swords because we're not going into battle.
So
Okay.
was it more of a metaphor, just for protection, not for, it was more for defense, not offense?
Yes. Yeah.
It was just a metaphor, basically.
Well, they cut the ear off.
Peter wanted to go to battle.
Well, I don't,
Who gave Peter the sword?
All of the
Don't
Psalms.
let him hold the sword.
I am not a preppy, okay, in the radical sense. But guys, I've got a couple hundred gallons of water set aside in an emergency. I've got a generator. I've got some weapons. I'm not a fanatic.
Basics.
But and I've got some food, stored that'll last. But I'm not a crazy preppy, but I do think the Lord said, we should be harmless as doves, but wise, as serpents. And I think this is part of it. He didn't say, okay, you each need to be armed.
Get your AK-47 ready.
We have 2 swords, and he says that's enough. You don't need any more.
Yeah.
And we know later as we get into the study that Peter used one of them to slice off the servant's ear. But I think that's what he's saying, and I just think it is interesting, that much of what we read in John 12 all the way through 18, is kind of ascribed to the night of the Lord's Supper. But guys, that's a lot of teaching, a lot of discourse, a lot of dialogue, and as I've been looking more closely into it, I'm leaning to the opinion that most of what John wrote took place probably in Bethany. The foot washing may have been in Bethany, and then his continuing dialogue or account of Jesus' teaching may have occurred there, as opposed to the night of the Lord's Supper, because that's a lot of stuff.
That is a lot, yeah.
A lot of stuff.
So what do you think is the most significant observation you made that kind of led you down that path?
I think, because, traditionally it's just kind of thrown at us, well, this is what he did at the Lord's Supper. He washed the disciples' feet, whatever. But when I went back and I looked at the words, before the feast, before the Paschal meal, he did this.
Mm-hmm.
And the washing of the feet is only in John's Gospel.
Mm-hmm.
The synoptic writers didn't include it at all. So why?
Yeah.
I would have thought the synoptics would have put it in there.
Yeah.
Okay. But again, they had a different agenda for their writing, and so did John, and we're trying to piece it together 2,000 years later. And you just can't be dogmatic. So I'm not trying to,
And you mentioned that agenda for John being different on the bottom of page 2, like the next to the last paragraph. You say the 3 synoptic writers recorded the Olivet Discourse, which described in terrifying details Jesus' prophetic teachings of the end times, but John's writing his record with another agenda in mind. What is that other agenda you're
well,
saying?
again, he's not writing a chronology of the life of Christ. What he's writing is an apologetic for the deity of Christ, focused basically on a number of miracles. Scholars debate the number because there's major miracles and there's some minor miracles that he throws in there. But basically, John's whole purpose of writing was to be an apology to the deity of Christ. And even the miracles he presents are out of order. They're not chronological. So, but the synoptic writers are writing chronologically. But three different writers, three different eye gates, writing to three different types of people for three different reasons. So they see the same things primarily. Luke is the one who has to, gain information because he wasn't an eyewitness, a participant. Well, he may have been a witness as an exterior disciple for a period of time. We don't know. Okay, but he basically had to interview and learn from the other disciples and gather it all together himself to put together his chronology. And he explains that in the front of his, introduction of Luke, and kind of repeats it again, when he gets into Acts. And then in Acts, he's an actual participant to many of the events. Yeah. But, Matthew and Mark were eyewitness participants, and they write differently. And they see the same event, and they pretty much describe it the same, but they present it differently, based on the audience to whom they're writing. Right. But their chronologies, pretty well follow along. One may add more detail than the other, okay, which is expected. Different eye gates, different impressions.
Like today, if you walked up here a while ago, one of us may say, well, it's windy today. Somebody else may say the sun is bright today. Somebody else may say it's very warm today.
Yeah.
It is, really.
Yeah. You use your word. You use different words that don't necessarily contradict each other,
but they all come.
But they're not necessarily the same.
Yeah.
It ties it all together.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
it's always been something I had dug deep into until we kind of started talking about it. But I always threw something up to, it always raised a flag for me when in John's account, he said, and having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Mm-hmm. Now, after the piece of bread, Satan had entered him, and Jesus said, what do you do quickly? Mm-hmm. Well, at that point in time, they're right kind of in the middle of the Passover meal.
Right.
And something so sacred, and why would Jesus even ask him to leave something that is so important and is so, in the middle of it?
Yeah, it really does not make sense when you look at it from that perspective.
And then if you go down and continue in John's account, he says, when the other disciples were talking, why did he get up and, said for some thought, because Judas had the money box, that Jesus had said to him, buy those things we need for the feast.
Exactly.
Which would be another meal other than the one they're participating in.
But it makes sense if it's not the Paschal meal,
right,
but a meal prior to that.
Correct.
Then the disciples would have thought that. Exactly. He's just sending them out, to buy stuff that we need for the upcoming Paschal meal.
Exactly.
So we're toggling between two different locations.
Possibly. Our tradition, that we all have sat under, says this all took place at the Last Supper. But I'm suggesting to you, after careful study, that may not be a correct interpretation. Mm-hmm. Okay? I don't want to be guilty of just, attacking church tradition. Tradition is not necessarily bad, but I'm a biblical purist, and when you look at John's account, it just seems to me, it's making me to lean to believe that everything, in John 12, 13, and subsequent to that, or following that, took place apart from the Last Supper. And if you look at even how he talked about the rooster crowing, it wasn't specific.
Tonight. This day.
It's the rooster will not crow before you denied me. But the other three, it'll be tonight. It'll be this day, that the rooster crows. So you put all that together, and I'm coming to the opinion that was actually two different meals, which just turns church tradition upside down. Doesn't change any of the doctrine or the theology or the truth, but it's just a matter of really, because part of this study was for us is to really understand the chronology of the events. What was really taking place and when and how and why. And I think it's easier to understand the broader picture of what was taking place that week if we can understand that John's account of what Jesus was teaching, basically took place apart from the actual Paschal meal, because it embodies all of the stuff that was going on. Judas's betrayal and, things he was trying to prepare his disciples for. It's surprising for me that John doesn't write about the end times, but then again, that wasn't his purpose. He's got revelation. He doesn't have revelation, but and that was different, purpose. But I don't know. It's just, I want to not look for things to go out of the box and be radical here, but it's just the more I dove into this and looked at the words and looked at the chronology, and the Collins, harmonies and MacArthur's, I'm seeing this in a different light, and so there it is. You guys do with it what you want. It really doesn't matter one way or the other. It's the truth that's being taught that's important. Again, as far as the chronology, that doesn't necessarily matter that much.
Another study.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions?
Looks like you said before, John's was not chronological. He was there to show the deity of Christ. And how many points was it? 6, 7, 8 times? He was writing to show, prove the deity of Jesus Christ. And how many different aspects? What
miracles?
Well, there were he focused on some scholars say 8 primary miracles, but there were some minor miracles in there also.
Right.
But,
and he said if you'd recorded all of them, all the books of the world could not contain all the miracles he did.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
he probably did just stuff,
Yeah.
seen a little child or something. You just don't know.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys had the cheat sheets. Since I printed out the wrong thing, so you don't have to write today. But but let's just talk about this for a minute. Jesus knew at the very point of Judas's departure, okay, that the Father's plan for the redemption of mankind was coming to a fulfillment. So when Judas had gone out, Jesus said, now the Son of Man is glorified. Now, I'm beginning to think that took place in Bethany, not necessarily at the Lord's Supper. Because there's really, the Synoptic Gospel writers don't mention Judas leaving the Last Supper. But John specifically points out that at the supper where he had watched the disciples' feet, and John had leaned on and he had announced that there was a betrayer in my midst. Okay, that John leaned on his shoulder and said, who is it, Lord? And he whispered back to John, not to the other disciples, it's the one to whom I give a piece of bread, and he hands it to him. But the other writers at the Paschal meal have a totally different account of how that happened.
At one point, he would have left the upper room.
Hmm?
At one point, he would have to left the upper room. Judas would have had left sometime.
He would have had to left early both times.
Yes.
Well, I'm thinking he went When
Because
they all left, he went with them. But in the darkness,
Because it came back with
But-
the troops.
Yes, he had to go back to the chief priest though and bring him back to where he was.
yeah. But I can see that happening, even if they all leave together in the darkness of night as they're heading to, Gethsemane and going down the Kidron Valley or whatever, how he can just kind of slip away, and say, hey, this is where they're going. I can envision that.
That was only a couple miles there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was going to ask, I forgot what you said, from Mary, Martha, and Lazarus' house down through the Kidron Valley over to Jerusalem is what, about 2 miles? Is that what?
Yeah, about 2 miles.
About 2 miles.
Yeah.
So about a 35, 40 minute walk, depending on how the terrain was.
Depending, yeah. Yeah. So he declared that he would receive glory. And because of that, God the Father would be glorified. Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. He declared that God the Father would glorify Jesus. I interpret that to mean fill him with divine strength and do so immediately to fulfill the redemption plan. God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him immediately. He had compassion and love for his disciples to the end. Remember, he's addressing them as little children.
Agape.
He gave a new and direct commandment to his disciples to love the brethren as he had loved them. Love one another as I have loved you. He declared the true indication or indicator of being his disciple is love for one another. Now, Peter questions why he couldn't stay physically present with Jesus. Lord, where are you going? He was warned that Satan was going to try to distract him from fulfilling God's purpose for his life. He was comforted by knowing Jesus was praying for him to remain strong. He was comforted by knowing his failure would not be permanent. When you have returned to me, strengthen your brethren. That should give us all hope, guys, when we fail.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
When we fell.
That's, I pray for you that your faith should not fail. When you have returned to me. That's what I was looking at, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So he foolishly believed he could follow Jesus by his own strength. I'm ready to go with you. I will lay down my life. He was given a direct prophecy of what was about to take place to confirm these things were of the Lord. Most surely I tell you, Peter, the rooster shall not crow this day before you will deny 3 times that you know. That's Luke's. Okay, that's not John's statement. But the point is, one of the things I believe God is faithful to do is to confirm prophetic statements. I told you my testimony, of how God gave me 3 visions, the third of which was the most dramatic, but he gave me 2 visions that preceded that actually took place word for word, event for event, before the third one came. So by the time the third one came, I knew it was real. He confirmed it, and he gave me comfort in that fact. Prior to that point, I was confused, I was concerned, anxious, but, I I go to work one day and whoa, I'm deja vu. I'm reliving, a prophetic vision that had been given me. And 2-3 days later, boom, there's the second one. Word for word, person for person.
This is why you're still in the Marines.
So I was still in the Marines. And then the final one, where I was in a strange place and the phone rings and, somebody hands me the phone and says, it's your commanding officer. And he says, Bill, I'm calling you and I'll be the first to tell you that, the list came out and your name was not on it. That was the third vision I had. And after the first two happened, we were, taking a short vacation and gone up to see, Terry's folks. And while we were there, the phone rings, and her dad hands me the phone, and the exact words that were in my vision were repeated by him on the phone.
Wow.
So, okay, so this is of God. And, a couple of months later, we were home in San Diego, and the commanding general of Fleet Marine Force Pacific, 3-star general, commanded more troops and oversaw more property than anybody but the commandant himself. You had FMF PAC, and you had FMF Atlantic, and that was a smaller command than PAC. And his headquarters is in Hawaii. Came to see me in San Diego. Came to my home. Civilian clothes.
In your vision.
No, this is real.
And
After I'd been passed over. Okay. And he came to me, came to visit. He'd been my 1st Battalion commander as a young second lieutenant, and he had been a regimental commander when I was, a company commander, and now was a 3-star general. And he came to see me, and he sat down in my living room and said, I know you've been passed over, what can I do for you? He would have only had to have written a letter that promote this guy, and it would have happened. And I said, General, I don't know all that's going on, but as much as I would like to stay in the Marine Corps and fulfill what I plan to do in my life, something else is going on here. And this is all of God. And this was taking place all during the reduction in force, the RIF after Vietnam. Mass, quick retirement of people, movement of people out, reduction in force. And so the rule was you can be passed over twice, but the second time you had to exit military. Okay. So I'd been passed over, and they had moved up, and normally the promotion list comes out every year, but because of the RIF, they moved it up 6 months. They're expediting everything, So I was on a short leash here, and the next promotion list was going to come out in the next couple of months, and I didn't do anything. I didn't write any letters. I didn't write the promotion board. I didn't, try to fight for, acceptance. I just said, I'm gonna trust God on this, And I told the general, I didn't tell him all that was going on. I didn't tell him about my vision or anything, but I said, General, I just think God is at work here, and I'm trusting him. And I said, if I'm worthy of being, promoted, it's going to happen. If God wants me to do something else, that's going to happen, And he said, okay. But whole point is God had given me comfort to know the truth of the vision. 3 visions, first 2 happened exactly as they were supposed to. And so when the third one happened, I can understand God was at work. Because remember, the last thing that took place in that third vision was, I don't know if it was the Lord or an angel, whatever, was standing over my left shoulder, reached out behind me and put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, Bill, you are not to worry. These things are of the Lord. There is something else you must do. And boom, vision over. So when the general came and said, what can I do? Don't do anything. I'm trusting God. If he wants me promoted, it'll happen. If there's something else he truly wants me to do, that's going to happen too.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
There we are.
So 3 things in the spirit world and 1 thing in the physical.